Hello, students. My name is Chris Ullman, and I am a communications professional in Washington, D.C. I've been here for 35 years. I came to Washington after I graduated from college, and I've had this really fascinating career. I've worked in the private sector at a small public relations firm. I've worked on Capitol Hill for a member of Congress. I've worked in the White House for President George W. Bush. And for the past 18 years, I worked at an investment firm called the Carlyle Group. This is a Wall Street type firm that buys things and makes them better and sells them. And then I started my own firm. I actually became an entrepreneur at the age of 55 and started a little communications firm. So that my whole career I've done communications, which means that I help people and organizations communicate with different audiences to help them achieve their various objectives. If they're a company, for example, that is selling something, I help them communicate to their audiences about their products or their services. So I've had this wonderful career here in Washington. And for many years ago, I got involved with Junior Achievement. So the fact that you are involved with them is a great thing. Junior Achievement is a fantastic program. It's a global organization helping people like you and other students from around the world with workplace readiness, entrepreneurship, and ultimately what they're really trying to help you do is to be the best you. Just as I have tried to be the best me for these past 35 years, you're kind of on the front end of that. You're at the beginning of your career, effectively. And the goal of Junior Achievement is to help you become the best you can be. So I'm really excited that you are tuning in today for this masterclass presentation. And I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. So I have had the great pleasure for the past 30 years of working with some really impressive people. These are people who run companies, who are senior government officials in the White House, for example, other people who are elected officials, governors of states. And I have learned just a ton of important lessons from these people. And I found myself sharing these lessons with people over the years because I do a lot of mentoring with young folks like you. So I decided I would write a book. So I have just finished writing a book, and it's called 4 Billionaires and a Parking Attendant, 49 Lessons for Life. And these are lessons that helped me and still are helping me become the best me. They help me think, they help me behave in ways that will bring about success in my personal life and in my professional life. So I am really excited to share 9 of those lessons with you today to help you become the best you in terms of your personal life, your academic life at school, and eventually your professional life when you have a job and you're working on your career. So I'm going to get right to it. So I'm going to give you a little overview of some of those lessons. One of them is about making sure that you matter, that you're not just sitting in the background, but that people get to know you and your thoughts. And that takes courage. And we're going to talk about that. Another one is about choosing to be happy, which a lot of people don't do, but it actually is a choice. And I'm really excited to tell you about a friend of mine, and I learned a powerful lesson from him. Another is about being ready for opportunity, not just kind of kicking back and relaxing, but being like a basketball player, ready for the rebound, that you're ready for opportunity. Another important thing is about being open to feedback, because the only way we get better as people is when you have an open mind and you actively get criticism, constructive criticism from people who want you to improve, but you have to be open to it. Another is about being joyful. It's a little different from being happy. but they're kind of similar. Another is about thinking logically. And as my family would tell you, I'm a very, very logical person. I do have some emotion, but I'm mostly logical. And I think there's a lot of power in being a logical person. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call your personal brand, which is kind of defining who you are, whether you're at school, whether you're in the community, whether you're in your job, so that people understand what you're about, what you stand for as a person. So I'm going to jump right into it. So here, lesson number 1 is what I call act like you're relevant, even when you're not. And for each of these lessons, I'm going to have a little story that accompanies it. So I used to work on Capitol Hill here in Washington for a very powerful member of Congress named John Kasich. This man then went on to be governor of Ohio, ran for president of the United States, didn't get it, but he tried. But I worked for him when he was the chairman of the House Budget Committee in Washington, D.C. And John acted like he was relevant, even though he wasn't. And let me tell you what that means. So the way it works in Washington is that you have the majority party and you have the minority party. And at that time, the Democrats ran Congress. They were the majority party. And John was a Republican, so he was in the minority. And he worked on the House Budget Committee. And his job was, for the most part, to just criticize the Democrats, because when you're in the minority, you have no power. But he said, I don't want to just criticize people. I actually want to tell people what I believe in and what I stand for. So he actually created his own budget every year, even though when you're in the minority, you never do that. So rather than sit on the side and just throw stones, he said, I'm going to act like I'm relevant, that I'm important, that what I say matters, even though people don't expect that from me. And he did this for several years, and people were a little surprised at first, but then they were kind of impressed by it, that he didn't just sit around waiting for life to happen. He said, I'm going to act like I'm relevant. And then an amazing thing happened. The Republicans won the Congress, control of Congress, and suddenly he is now in charge of the Budget Committee. He then goes over to his shelf, pulls off the budget, slaps it down on the table and says, that's what I stand for. We're ready to go. I have a staff that knows how to do this. I know how to talk about a budget because they're very complex things. And the media and the newspapers, they have respect for me because I know what I'm talking about. And the most powerful part about this lesson is that a lot of times in life, you are like either new in a job or you're the low person in a hierarchy, and you probably think you don't matter. You may have a job, but you're just the young person and you don't know anything. But if you act like you're relevant, even though you're not, you will gain stature, you will gain authority, you will become relevant. And I'll give you an example. So say you were in a staff meeting with a bunch of people and a bunch of senior people, and then you're the junior person and the big boss says, hey, I need a memo written. Well, if you raise your hand and say, I will do it, you suddenly go from irrelevance to relevance, just like that. You then have power. You write a document, you get the edits, you become relevant. It's a very, very powerful lesson. And this is exactly what John Kasich did. He was irrelevant, but he acted like he was relevant. So the lesson here is don't sit around waiting for life to happen. Get in the ring, raise your hand, and tell people that you want to be involved, that you can contribute, and they will take it, because not everyone raises their hand. But when you do, people will welcome you. You will suddenly become relevant, and you'll feel more important, and you'll actually be able to make a difference. So it's a super powerful lesson. And even though I learned this literally 25 years ago, almost every day, I still practice this lesson. So once again, it's called act like you're relevant, even when you're not. So lesson number 2, this is a really cool one. It's called hang around the hoop. And for those of you who like basketball, You know what that's like. The ball hits the rim, but doesn't go in and bounces off. And are you ready for the rebound or not? Because that's what hang around the hoop is all about. Are you ready for the rebound? And a lot depends on your physical stature. Like if you're just kind of relaxing and the ball comes in your direction, whoop, it's going to go right by you. But if you are eager and your knees are bent and your eyes are ready and your hands are ready, when that ball comes in your direction, you will get it. So it's a physical stance, but it's also a mental attitude. Because if you are just kind of hanging around, checking your iPhone rather than like paying attention, you will miss the rebound. But if you are mentally prepared and you're paying attention and you are excited, you will get the rebound. So how does that work in real life? So the example I have here is at this investment firm I used to work at. The founder of the firm was named Bill Conway, and Bill used this term all the time. And here's the example. One time, Carlyle tried to invest in a company, and unfortunately, someone else won the investment. And Bill was very sad about that, but he didn't burn any bridges. He didn't call them up and say, "You're a jerk for not letting us buy that company, and we're never going to do business with you again." And rather, he said, "I wish we had won, but I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope to do business with you again." And then he steps back. Then, interestingly, the company that won the deal, it fell through. They were no longer able to make this investment. So the seller calls up Bill and says, "Hey, Bill, those other people are gone. Are you interested still in buying the company?" So Bill was like, yes. He was hanging around the hoop. He was respectful when they lost the deal, and he was ready for that phone call in case it came. And now Bill was in a position of power because there was no one else to buy the company, and he actually bought it for less than he expected. So he was hanging around the hoop. He had a physical stance of readiness. He had a mental stance of readiness. And when the opportunity came, they were ready for it. So throughout your life, you're going to experience the same types of things, is that opportunity is all around you. And are you physically ready and are you mentally ready to seize that opportunity? Some people are going to be just hanging back. Opportunity is going to pass them by. But if you are ready mentally and physically, you will get the opportunity. It is an attitude, physically and mentally, of people who want to seek and grasp opportunity. So this is a super important lesson. Our third lesson is what I call think like your successor every day. I really love this one here. And this one comes from a man named Arthur Levitt. And he was my boss at this big federal agency in Washington called the Securities and Exchange Commission. Arthur is an amazing man. He's 91 years old today, and I worked for him 25 years ago. And Arthur is a very open person. He always wants to improve. He doesn't close his mind and then push away people or ideas that are different or that perhaps even criticize him. He's very open. So this whole notion of thinking like your successor every day, let me tell you how it works. So someday you're going to have a job and you're going to be in the office and you're going to go to that office every day and you have your little routines and you're doing your thing. But when you get set in your habits, what you did yesterday is kind of what you're going to do today, and it's kind of what you're going to do tomorrow. But are you open to feedback or not from other people? Because think about this. If you left that job, if you got fired or you died or you quit, someone else is going to take your job and they're going to sit in your same desk and they're going to look at all the things you did every day and they're going to say, wow, this stuff here that Chris did was brilliant. We got to do more of that. And this stuff here that Chris did, that made sense. That was pretty normal. And this stuff over here was crazy. What was Chris thinking? Well, if I think like my successor every day, before I quit, die, or get fired, while I still have the job, I will be able to think like that successor. And the good stuff I'm going to keep doing, and the stupid stuff, I'm going to try to get rid of it and make it better. And how do you do that? Well, you have to be open-minded. There are people out there, I don't care if they're your age, my age, or you're 90 years old, some of them have very closed minds. They don't care what other people think. They say, this is how I do it, and that's how I'm going to keep doing it. And unfortunately, that is not how you improve. If you want to improve, if you want to be the best you, remember I said that right at the beginning, if you want to be the best you possible, you must be open to feedback from smart people. And you're not just open to it, you actually have to go get it. You have to go to people and say, give me feedback. I want to improve. So this lesson of thinking like your successor every day is just so important, because it will help you improve and get rid of the things that are unproductive and focus on the things that are really good and the things that are really great. And then that way you will improve as a person, as a leader, and your organization will benefit from that as well. So think like your successor every day, which means be open to feedback. This next lesson, I just love this lesson. It's called Be Joyful at the Office. And I'm really big on this because I'm a pretty happy guy, and I like joy, and I'm a pretty joyful person too. But when you're in the office, sometimes people feel like they can't be joyful, that they're there and it's serious, and they can't talk about sports or their families or things like that. It's just there to work. And I'm not a big fan of that. I think we need to be joyful at the office. So I had this great example. So when I worked at that place called the Carlyle Group, a very senior woman, her name was Adina Friedman. She was the chief financial officer. So she was one of the top people in the organization. And she did this really, really fun, joyful thing one time, and it just stuck in my brain. And even though this was like 15 years ago, it brings me joy just to think about it. So here's the example. So the Carlyle Group had to give this very important report to Wall Street because Carlyle was a public company. It was called our quarterly earnings. And this is something you do once a quarter, so 4 times a year. And you have to tell Wall Street how your company is doing. Well, this one time, Carlyle was not in the best of shape. So this report was going to be a bit of a downer. And everyone knew that. So Adina did this really fun thing. She printed up t-shirts, white t-shirts with big happy faces on them. Like we're talking like this big, right across the chest. And she brings these to this meeting with all of these bigwigs who are going to do this important call with Wall Street, and asks everyone to wear the happy t-shirts. And so that when they were doing this call, they would actually be happy and not be kind of glum. Because we know what it's like, if you have a good mindset, even if you're talking about a difficult subject, you might just approach it in a slightly more buoyant or happy way. But if you're just in your old boring business suits, you might just be a little kind of dumpy about it. Anyway, this was an amazing thing. So she put on her t-shirt, I put on my t-shirt. Unfortunately, no one else actually put on the t-shirt, but I loved her spirit. And it was a very courageous and bold thing to do. And I will never forget this example of kind of bringing joy into the office in this very creative way. And what's interesting is that every one of us has that possibility to be a joyful person. And whether you're in the classroom or whether you're in summer camp or whether you're in your job, once, you graduate from college and all that, you have a choice. Are you going to be kind of the dumpy person in the office or the joyful person in the office? And Adina's example with this happy face t-shirt was really a good example of how to bring joy to the office, especially in a challenging situation. So that one makes me very happy. Now, speaking of happiness, here is a really, really fun example. And you may recall that the title of the book, which I said at the beginning, is called 4 Billionaires and a Parking Attendant, 49 Lessons for Life. This lesson comes from the parking attendant. And so I worked at, again, that company called Carlyle, and there were literally 3 billionaires who ran the place, and then a ton of other people who were just incredibly wealthy. So every day for 17 years, I would drive my car into the parking lot in the basement, and this young man, his name was Sala, would greet me, and he would park my car. So I saw him for years, and we got to be friends. He was an immigrant from Ethiopia, and he was always happy. And what was interesting about his circumstances, I mean, here he is, he's working underground, so there's no natural light. It's either really hot in the summer or really cold in the winter. But Sala chose to be happy. He could have been kind of grumpy or felt bad for himself, because compared to the billionaires, he wasn't making a lot of money. But every day when I greeted him, he would greet me with this big smile, and he'd say, "Good morning, Mr. Chris. How are you? How's your family?" We got to be friends. When he became an American citizen, I brought 2 of my daughters to his naturalization ceremony. And it was an exquisite experience to see him become an American. And he has made our country better. And what was really fascinating about Sala was that here I drive in, he would greet me with this big smile, choosing to be happy. And then I would take the stairs and the elevator up to the 2nd or the 3rd floor where all the billionaires were. And you know what? They weren't always that happy. They were actually kind of grumpy more often than not. Now, they had a lot of pressures in their life, sure, but here the parking attendant is choosing to be happy despite his challenging circumstances, and the billionaires, kind of grumpy. And I thought that was just really crazy. So I love this example because it's really a lesson for each of us that no matter what your circumstances are, it's important to choose to be happy. It's not just something that happens. You actually have to have a certain type of outlook. You have to look at the bright side. You have to be thankful for the gifts that you have. And even though there are challenges, you have to be hopeful. And Sala was a very hopeful person. So his example to me was very powerful, because even I could get grumpy when I probably didn't need to be grumpy. And happiness is contagious. If you are happy, the people around you will probably be happy or happier as well. So we can all learn from the billionaires, but we can also learn from the parking attendant. I know I certainly did. So I have this next lesson, is a really neat one. It's what I call the power of transactional thinking. So what does that mean? Is that too often people let emotion determine how they think and react to things. So if you get bad news about something, you might just break into tears, or you might yell, or you might hit someone, or like you're letting emotion determine how you react. And I'm much more of a logical guy. If I get news I don't like, I still don't like it, but I don't let emotion determine how I'm going to think and behave. I try to be more transactional about it. So I'm going to give you an example here of the power of transactional thinking. So one time when I was at the Carlyle Group, I had the chance to get another job. So I wasn't looking for a job, but I had this opportunity. So I went to New York, and I was offered a job, a really powerful job at a big Wall Street bank. And so I came back to Washington, and this is crazy, but within like 48 hours, my boss heard that I was considering this other job. So he calls me up, and now he could have been really upset, but this is what he said instead. He said, "These are the 5 reasons that you would consider this job." So he went for the logical. And I said, "Yeah, those are the 5 reasons." And I tried to talk to him and explain. He's like, "I don't want to talk." He said, "I don't want you to leave. What will it take for you to stay?" And before I could even say anything, he just volunteers. He said, I will do this, this, and this, pay you more money, make you a partner. And I said, "Well, that'll be great." And he said, "I'll call you back in 15 minutes. He calls me back and says, "It's done. We're going to do all those things. Now make that big bank go away." So I agreed. Now, you might say this is like totally makes sense, but I have seen so many examples in my life where people in that circumstance would be very emotional. They wouldn't be transactional. And what would they have done? They would have said, "You betrayed me. I can't trust you anymore. I've been so good to you. How could you do this to me?" Instead, David, and it was David Rubenstein, the founder of the firm, who made this offer to me. And he said, "We're just going to be logical about this. We want you to stay. We will do these things. I can see why you'd talk to those people in the first place." And then he hangs up the phone, and the whole thing took 20 minutes. So instead of ruining his day by being too emotional, he solved the problem and then went on to go solve 20 other problems that day. But when you're too emotional, it gets in the way of getting business done. Now, does that mean you shouldn't have any emotion? Of course not. If I had to have a ratio, I would make it kind of an 80% to 20%, 80% logic, 20% emotion, and which I think is a good ratio. So the power of transactional thinking is a fantastic way to get things done, not let emotion derail you from your mission. So those are some things to think about. All right, here's one that I'm very excited about. This is about what I call defining your personal brand. You might say, "Well, what does that mean?" And I'd say, well, everyone has a brand. And a brand, like, you're familiar with brands like logos that are attached to like goods. It could be an iPhone has the certain logo, and you're used to that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about kind of the emotional reaction that you have to the brand. When you think of Nike sneakers, or a great basketball player, or an iPhone, or your favorite pizza, like, you actually have an emotional reaction to that, in terms of what is special about it, why you like it, why you keep buying it, and all that. And so that brand really matters. And what's interesting is that you have a brand as well, a personal brand for you. I have a brand as well. And it is our job to define that brand so that people we interact with, whether it's at school or college or in our job or on a Zoom call like this, that people will react to you in certain ways. Now, I want my brand to be that I am trustworthy, that I am smart, that I'm responsive and reliable, and that I add value. Like, these are all different aspects of what makes me a person, but perhaps more importantly, it makes people want to deal with me because I am a consultant and I'm selling my services. So how people react to you is really important, and you have a lot of control over that by how you behave and by how you think day in and day out. the lesson here is about the importance of paying attention to your brand so that people will so how you think and behave day in and day out will impact how people perceive you, whether they'll be friends with you, whether they will want to lend you money if they're a bank, whether they will hire you if they're a prospective employer, whether they will accept you if you are applying to college. Your brand really matters. So I'm going to give you a specific example. This is a great one. So I used to work for a man named Mitch Daniels. This is in the White House. It was in the White House budget office. And Mitch paid a lot of attention to his personal brand. He then went on to be governor of the state of Indiana for 8 years. Then he became president of Purdue University for, I think, 11 years. Very accomplished man. So a few years ago, I read an article about him. And in this article, like every single paragraph had what I call is like one part of his brand. And Mitch's brand was that he was thrifty, he was smart, he was creative, he was a man of the people, and he was like super innovative, and he was funny. So these are the things, like when people think about me, they think about certain things. When they think about you, they think about certain things. And when they think about Mitch, these kind of 5 or 6 things, this is what his brand was. This is what they think about. And in this article, it captured every single one of those. So what's interesting about this is that those things are who Mitch is on one hand, but he's also worked hard to get people to realize that. He also has hired people like me, PR people, to talk to journalists and kind of plant seeds so that they will also realize that these 6 things that are special about Mitch. And when I read this article, I said, oh my gosh, this is a perfect example of someone who has actually worked hard to define his personal brand. And then it's captured in this article so that people who read it will be able to understand him and either hire him or vote for him or want to be friends with him or whatever it is. And so the point of this is that you should be thinking about your personal brand as well. Now, you may only be a teenager, or you might be in college. It's never too early to start thinking about how you want people to perceive you. Because when you apply for college, you're going to have to write a personal essay. And what are the things you're going to talk about in there that capture who you are as a person? That is your personal brand. And do you want people to think you're smart and reliable and creative and warm and caring, someone who volunteers in the community? Well, if so, then you need to do those things. You need to be well-read, and you need to work hard in school, and you need to volunteer in the community, and you need to be nice to people, because this is not about superficial brand. This is about real brand. It has to be authentic, and it can't be fake. So this is you're never too young to kind of think about brand, and because it will have a huge impact on how people perceive you over time. So Mitch taught me a lot about that, and it's been good for me as a person, as a professional. Here's another one I'm really excited about. This lesson is called Be an Advisor, Not a Note Taker. And of all the lessons I've shared with you, this may be the most important one. So what does that mean? Be an advisor, not a note taker. So I'm just going to give you an example. So when I worked for that man, Arthur Levitt, at the Securities and Exchange Commission, one day a reporter called me and said, with this bad news. So I dutifully write it down, and I go to Arthur, he's the chairman, he's the bigwig. And I say, Arthur, we have a problem. The Wall Street Journal is writing a story and you're not going to like it. What should we do? And then Arthur looks at me, and he has these like piercing blue eyes, and he says, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And he just walks away. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that was the stupidest thing ever. What I should have done was bring him a solution to the problem. So I went back to my office, felt bad for a little while, not too long, came up with some solutions, went back to Arthur for take two, and then I was actually being an advisor, not a note taker. A note taker just writes something down and hands it to someone else and says, what do you want to do? An advisor writes something down, then does some research, comes up with options, makes a recommendation, then discusses it with the boss or the client. And that's why he hired me, to be an advisor. And so the reason this lesson is so incredibly important is that throughout your life, you will have a choice. In every single day, you will have choices of being a note taker or an advisor. Are you just going to dutifully write stuff down and have someone else make decisions? Or are you going to help people make decisions? And eventually, some of you are going to be the CEO of something, and you're going to have to hire people who will help you make decisions, because CEOs may be smart and hardworking, but they don't know everything and they can't do it all themselves. So they need people. But what they need is advisors, people who will help them make good decisions. And this is a choice. It's sort of like what I said before about choosing to be happy. You have to choose to be an advisor. And to be an advisor is hard. It is not easy. It is because what it requires is gathering information and thinking through it, coming up with options if it's a problem, and then choosing a recommended pathway, and then making the case and discussing it with the client or the boss. This is all hard. But if you're an advisor, you will be more important. You'll be more satisfied. You will be more relevant. You will make more money. You will advance quicker. Note takers, while I'm not commenting on their humanity, but they're not going to make as much money. They're not going to advance as much in their career. So when you're an advisor, you are more important. It takes work, but it is worth it, because you will be able to add more value in whatever organization you're involved with. And here's my last lesson. This one's called Homeless People Have Names Too. So one of the founders of Carlisle, I mentioned him earlier, Bill Conway, he used to go to church every day and in the morning. And on the way there, he would talk to the homeless people he met between the office and the church. He actually got to be friends with them. And at first he was scared because of all the things he had heard about homeless people, and they're dangerous and they smell and they're on drugs. But the more Bill met these people and learned their names and learned their backgrounds, and he actually did this. This is a billionaire who's spending time chatting with homeless people on the street on the way to church. And this is an incredibly powerful lesson, is that no matter whether you have a home or not, these people who are homeless are relevant. They are children of God, and they have names too. And it's a great example for all of us to be humble, that to know that just because someone doesn't have a home doesn't mean they are not special as well. So what was the impact of this? So what Bill started to do is he would buy them shoes. He would give them gift cards to Starbucks or Baskin Robbins so they could buy a sandwich or a coffee or something like that. Then Bill started roaming around the office with hundreds of these gift cards, and he would give them to people and say, if you promise to give these to homeless people, I will give you a stack of 10, 20, or 30 of them. And I always accepted them. And I was scared of homeless people too. But once I started giving them the cards and finding out their names, I found out, well, they're just like us, unfortunately, but they don't have a home. And so this was a great inspiration to have this billionaire guy working with these homeless people. And then he said, I need to do something more. So he gave tens of millions of dollars to an organization here in Washington called So Others Might Eat, to help homeless people. And then he started job training programs and other programs to help them go from homelessness to live a life with a home and a job and healthcare and the like. And it was very inspiring. And many people think the rich people just don't care about poor people, but this man did and still does. And it was a great inspiration for me and everyone else we worked with. And to this day, I still carry around gift cards for Starbucks. And anytime I see a homeless person, I will give them the card and then tell them I will pray for them. And I ask them to pray for me too, because we all need prayer. So those are my 9 lessons. I hope you found them interesting and challenging, because this stuff isn't easy. But the most important thing here is that you take command of your life, is that you don't want to be just relaxing, sitting back, waiting for life to happen. What you want to be doing is being open to feedback and kind of hanging around the hoop and ready for opportunity and having the courage to engage and give your opinion and to be relevant. And, because the bottom line is that some people are going to do that. And if it's not you, it's going to be someone else. So your future is in your hands. And a group like Junior Achievement is trying to help you realize that and give you tools to help you be your best self. So I hope you found this interesting and fruitful. I hope I planted some seeds in your brain, and I'm real excited for your future, and I wish you well. Thank you.